it just makes sense to go for that low hanging fruit. So what you're seeing with AI is, what are the mundane tasks that we hate about our job? Scheduling interviews, constantly following up with candidates. Like what I mentioned, the sourcing, sifting through candidates, a lot of that is time consuming. It is a low hanging fruit for AI because there's suddenly this like crazy advancement in technology that is able to automate a lot of what people hated about their job, or maybe just enjoyed that part less comparative to the conversations about candidates with candidates and how to advance their career in this new role and how what they're trying to do in their career aligns with the mission of the company. Like those are so much more invigorating conversations than scrolling next page. I like this person, scroll next page. I like this person, reach out. But that's where it's at right now. It's going after those mundane tasks. And so I think you're seeing a lot of the focus on top of funnel for which makes sense. It's how do you analyze large amounts of data in a very effective way? AI is great at that. That's where you're seeing the first wave. And so my thought was like, what's next? The next is like, okay, you can get all the candidates in the funnel, you can get the best candidates, but what happens if your funnel's broken? How do you even know what's broken about it? So I think on one hand, it's the understanding. So it's like the diagnosis, the analysis of how things have gone typically at your company, because past performance usually means future outcomes as well, unless you take action, unless you understand, unless you create a plan and so forth. And so the thought of that there's a different underlies use case of AI is further in the funnel. Like how do you optimize like how people are impacting the process?
Hi, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Kevin Serwatka, and Kevin is the founder of a company called Benchmark, an AI-powered hiring optimization platform. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead and give us a little bit more about your background and what brought you to starting Benchmark.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kevin Serwatka, as you mentioned. I am a husband, a dad of two. I've got a little 3.5-year-old little boy. I've got a little 1-year-old daughter. I'm a Texan, Austin native. Tennis is really important to me. It's provided a lot for me in my life. I'm very grateful for that. And I got my degree in healthcare admin and found myself in recruiting, but I'm a 12-year talent veteran to where I started off in the agency world, where I was really focused on helping hospitals become more compliant with Obamacare and the Meaningful Use Act, basically, to where their electronic medical records and hospital systems were congruent and acceptable based on the legislation that was passed, essentially. So hiring engineers to make sure that that happened. And then after about a year doing that, I got recruited to Google, where I was there for about 4 years, predominantly doing top of funnel sourcing for technical program managers, engineers, but all in like the cloud space, especially like whenever their cloud like was like in rapid growth mode. So that was really, really fun. Moved over to Facebook, now Meta, where I started off hiring engineers, basically helping for their community operations team, which helps mitigate the bad actors that are trying to do bad things on Facebook, basically. And then ultimately moved into leading the non-technical function in that group. And that came about by doing a big like analysis of the organization, seeing how things could be optimized, and then create a proposal. And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead, lead the team, and let's do it." So that we did that, went really well, enjoyed that. And then shortly after that, I moved over to Robinhood, where I was the head of sourcing on the non-technical side. I went there in the middle of all the the beginning of all the GameStop stuff that was going on. And a lot of what we were doing was optimizing and improving hiring for a lot of what, frankly, they said they need, that Congress needed, what Congress told them that they needed to improve on: customer support, finance, and things like that, for auto abuse risk. And so was there for a while, and then moved over to the VC space, where I was a talent partner for a venture capital firm. And then I was basically advising throughout the portfolio, where they'd parachute me into a portfolio company, whether it was from a strategic perspective, helping them optimize or get better in their recruiting, essentially, or even helping them hire candidates for their essential roles, basically. So I was doing that. And then shortly after that, I moved into consulting, where I was basically doing a lot of what I was doing in the VC space, but for my own clients, helping them optimize their hiring, also helping them hire as well, with the thought that if we help them hire better, we'd be better at actually hiring for them. And in the process of that, I realized that there was probably a way to automate a lot of what I was doing by going in, evaluating an organization, taking out data, looking at external sources as well, and just basically gathering a lot of data and historical performance, and then figuring out, okay, you're here, you're trying to get here. What do you need to do to get to that point and do it well? Pretty much realized there was a way to automate that. And so that's how I created Benchmark It, which is like you mentioned, it's a AI powered platform that helps companies optimize their hiring function. Like at first, I started like, hey, I really want to just build really great reporting because I didn't like ATS reporting. And then in the process, it was like, hey, AI is starting to rear its head. We can add some intelligence to this to create something really powerful. And so it also automates the analysis of recruiting performance and hiring processes. And it helps talent teams identify like bottlenecks, how they can, where they can improve their efficiency and make data driven decisions. And we do a very in-depth AI analysis of like every layer of your hiring process. So every recruiter, every job, every key metric, and however you want to slice and dice that data with different filters. We do an AI analysis on that, and then we aggregate all that information to basically be able to say, hey, your organization, we're seeing this across these 4 or 5 things across the organization multiple times. If you address this, it's going to impact your organization positively. So we're doing that. We also have some pretty cool custom reports. We have a light in the dark mode for those who care. But yeah, it's been really fun going from town operator to building. It's been a really fun journey, and we're just getting started. We've got our first customers, we've onboarded them, and we're trying to get to the next round.
When you and I first spoke about this and what drove you, let's go into that for a second because I think it's going to segue us into some of the topics that we want to talk about here. So, where did you see a need for this? And I've met with a couple of other data analytics companies, and I've interviewed a couple of other founders from data analytics companies, and it's something we need right now. I mean, this is a service that is in demand, especially with all of the transition to AI tools and platforms, right? So, where did you see the need, Kevin, and kind of what prompted you to do this?
Well, I think I was always known as like the data guy in my teams, and like I didn't know SQL, I didn't know how to pull data. I was just someone who cared about it and looked at it. And so I think there was I think I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but you don't see a lot of data literacy in HR functions. It's just not something that people go to the industry to go and exercise that muscle typically. And so like every company I worked at had hiring data, but they none of them really knew exactly what to do with it, or they'd find out what to do with like a corner of it. And like maybe one group of the business would do really, really well at it. But then there's some other information over here that could bring insights that could even strengthen whatever analysis you did here. So I think it was just seeing like some pattern recognition of where I naturally gravitated to. And that led me to wanting to create. But also, it was really cool going to the VC firm I was at and just sitting alongside founders and hearing them talk. And it's really interesting. Founders are people who just try. They just tried. They had a passion. They had something burning inside them. And they're like, I want to try something. And that was within me, and I just hadn't quite identified it. And then as I was doing the consulting and with honestly the rise of AI, and here I am, a recruiter by trade, being able to build this platform with 2 engineers. Like those capabilities previously weren't there. So I think the developments in technology mixed with like burning desire and leaning on just what I gravitated to is really like what created this.
That's amazing. It really is. It's fantastic that you're doing this. And again, I mean, just based on conversations I'm having with practitioners, people on the HR side and the talent acquisition side, it's all about the data right now. I mean, and not just data for hiring, but also data to determine what's going to work as we move forward with AI as our side by side partner here. What's going to work best? What's going to be effective? Utilizing the applicant tracking systems. And there's like how many applicant tracking systems out there?
I mean, we
So
connect to
many.
46, and that's a small fraction of them.
46?
Yeah,
Really?
well, it's many players, but that's still just a fraction of them, honestly.
I didn't even okay, that's a whole different conversation. But anyway, I mean, just the idea that we're trying to understand what's our roadmap ahead? Where are we heading? Our sourcing team's dead, right? I mean, what's going to determine that?
Yeah, as someone who's a sourcer, and I love geeking out on Boolean and being like doing Boolean competition of who could write the longest and most complex. Like I love that stuff. It honestly energized me. But then once you write that, then you sift through a swath of candidates. You're going through so much, and it takes a lot of time. That's all not always the most enjoyable part of the role. So like AI is replacing a lot of that. And on one hand, it kind of pains me to say that, but on another, like I think it's really exciting. So I think like at larger companies, you saw the delineation of sorcerer and recruiter. You didn't really see that so much in smaller companies because you got to wear multiple hats at smaller companies. So I think at larger companies, I think the need for like a dedicated sourcing function, there's still going to be a need, but what it looks like, I think will inherently change. You have all these platforms that are able to do a pretty good job of like narrowing the funnel of candidates and like by just uploading a job description or saying like this is like the roadmap of the company, what we're looking for, and it creates a curated pipeline. And so I think there still needs to be like a human in the loop on this, like whenever you're talking to candidates, because it is such a personal decision making a career change. But I think going to your question about like what is our sourcing teams going to look like, I think they're going to be smaller. I would assume so, but I think that people will move more into people ops or more into traditional recruiter roles. But I still think there's a need for really really good sources that are good at like inferring a lot of information that maybe AI may or may not be able to do. But it's tough because I mean I led a large sourcing organization, and will that be necessary moving forward? Not as much, I don't think so. But yeah, it's an evolving topic. There's some really great tools out there and like Seek Out, Juicebox. There's some really really good ones.
Yeah, but okay, but I'm gonna say yes, they are good. However, they're still tied to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is still the back end of a lot of these tools.
Yep.
So now, and I realize that it's almost like they provide the same sourcing capability that LinkedIn does, except that they offer maybe some advancements with sourcing. So let's talk about that for a minute because it doesn't look like these tools are gonna go away. I mean, Seek Out, Juicebox, LinkedIn, Hire Easy, these tools are still kinda sticking around.
Yep.
Why are they sticking around if AI is gonna do the sourcing? We need to kinda, like, dive into that for just a minute.
I mean, I kind of look at this like the Samsung versus Apple argument. Samsung always comes out with a better camera first, and here's Apple just trudging along. They know they're going to be around forever. They're watching what everybody's doing. They're going to build their roadmap according to what these edge cases are, and then suddenly, oh wow, Apple has this new camera that has been out for 2 years. I did Samsung, and so I look at like the Seek Outs, the Hire Easy, the Juice Box, in a similar light. I mean, I think there's nuance there that's different that they're pulling from different databases as well. They certainly, I would assume they're pulling from LinkedIn. Maybe they've scraped it. Who knows? I don't know that. I don't know how they operate, but I think they are going to have that backbone that they've been able to figure out, and then they're also going to like have inference of different data sources as well. So I think in a way, like how they are going to advance is going to be more data aggregators versus LinkedIn is like, hey, we are the source of truth. But then you have these data aggregators that are putting in natural language processing that allows you to speak to it and talk about what you want or copy paste a job description. I'm sure LinkedIn is going to get there, but they're probably watching what these other players are doing. And then they're going to implement it to where it's like, hey, we are the source of truth. We have the best data source, the open to hire thing as well as a very valuable function that doesn't really exist elsewhere. So I don't know. I think they'll both continue to exist, and I think they'll both kind of go different directions. But then LinkedIn is going to start probably looking more like these, while these are going to try to differentiate themselves by being data aggregators in different ways, and having some certain bells
Ah.
and whistles.
That's interesting. I like that because you almost have to have a plan for your company. Because what if LinkedIn all of a sudden one day comes along and says, sorry, we're going to go ahead and cut everybody off now because we have come up with our own sourcing mechanisms and we have our new tools out there. Like you said, all of a sudden, yaha, here we are. We're not the new bling. We're shiny. We've got this new. I mean, I'm not crazy about the LinkedIn AI tools that they have right now, but like you said, they're gonna improve, right? And once they get there, are they gonna cut everybody else off who's using them as a back end, right?
They might already have. Like I don't know. Like I mean, if I'm LinkedIn, I do.
Right? So I think it's good that these companies then are going to become data aggregators, right? Because we're gonna need more of that, I think, as we pludge along here, right? One of the other things that you had mentioned as well was AI's current focus is on low-hanging fruit. So let's talk about that for a minute because I think that's important, especially for the community and our listeners. AI is targeting low-hanging fruit right now on the ATS side and also for the other tools that are out there. So tell me what you think about that, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's natural. Like there's a new technology that automates that can handle tasks at scale that humans would do on a repeated basis but they do it does it quicker. So it just makes sense to go for that low hanging fruit. And so you like feel like anytime there's been an advancement in technology, you could probably say the same thing. So what you're seeing with AI is What are the mundane tasks that we hate about our job? Scheduling interviews, constantly following up with candidates. Like when I mentioned the sourcing, sifting through candidates, a lot of that is time consuming. It is a low hanging fruit for AI because there's suddenly this like crazy advancement in technology that is able to automate a lot of what people hated about their job, or maybe just not, I don't want to say hate it, but like maybe just enjoy that part less comparative to the conversations about candidates with candidates and how to advance their career in this new role and how they're what they're trying to do in their career aligns with the mission of the company. Like those are so much more invigorating conversations than scrolling next page. I like this person. Scroll next page. I like this person. Reach out. And so, like, I don't mean that in a negative light that it's going after the low hanging fruit, but that's where it's at right now. It's going after those mundane tasks. And so, I think you're seeing a lot of the focus on top of funnel for which makes sense. It's how do you analyze large amounts of data in a very effective way? That AI is great at that. And so, I think that's where you're seeing the first wave, and really that's also what inspired me to create Benchmark it. I didn't want to go after that because there's some great tools out there, and they're probably going to get there quicker than I would. And so my thought was like, what's next? The next is like, okay, you can get all the candidates in the funnel, you can get the best candidates, but what happens if your funnel's broken? Like, and how do you even know what's broken about it? So I think on one hand, it's the understanding. So it's like the diagnosis, the analysis of how things have gone typically at your company, because past performance usually means future outcomes as well, unless you take action, unless you understand, unless you create a plan and so forth. And so the thought of of that there's a different underlies use case of AI is further in the funnel. Like how do you optimize like how people are impacting the process? And there's some other technologies out there that are doing a great job. I think BrightHire is doing a great job of like analyzing interviews, getting the feedback from those interviews, but also coaching interviewers. Like that's a great use case of AI impacting a little bit further down the funnel versus just getting candidates in. And so I think the next layer is going to be really like optimizing every layer of the process. I'm very biased because I've created in this space, but I think that's just a natural progression. Like what are the main things that are mundane and that take a lot of time? Top of funnel, sorting, sifting, looking through resumes, narrowing a pool. Well, then the next phase is going to look a layer deeper. It's like, okay, now we've got that down, but we're getting candidates in and they're not making it through the process. What's going on? Let's use AI to do that. Let's figure that out. So I think you're starting to see some other companies rear their head to do something similar as well. And that's what we're building into.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second because you just made a really good point. So once you have candidates identified, whether you're doing it on your own or you're using an AI supported tool or your ATS, whatever the case may be, let's say you've got 10 candidates in front of you, but they're not making it through the process, right? What, how is AI then going to help us with that? What are the issues? Why aren't these people making it through the process? And I have a client with a similar, an issue right now. Um, their interview process is just cumbersome at best, right?
It's not
So let's
uncommon, unfortunately.
huh?
It's not uncommon, unfortunately.
No, it's not uncommon. But how is AI gonna fix something like that? Because let's look at some of the key issues that we have. Once we have identified candidates, what are our key issues for getting those candidates through the process, and how is AI gonna help us with that?
Yeah. I mean, how we've broken it down is in three main categories: speed, quality, and experience. Speed is pretty self-explanatory. Like how quickly are they getting to the interview process? How long does it take them to get through the interview process? Like in what stage? How quick are we to schedule and all speed metrics? You get the point. Quality being like how well are they moving through the funnel? So that's more quality is more on like the quality of candidate. And so like are we getting in our selection process, are we getting the right candidates through the process? Okay, like if we're looking at speed metrics, we can see, okay, here are some red flags. Maybe we're seeing a whether it's compared to industry benchmarks or historical performance, we can see some indicators of this is what's going on. Okay, let's let AI do an analysis of like and pattern match what's going on in those areas to then identify what's going on. And same thing with quality and same thing with experience. So I think there's the answer to your question, I think, is twofold, well, threefold. For one, it depends on the organization. It depends on the scenario. For two, then the other two are it's in the moment, what do you do? And then also what do you do beforehand to prevent the moment from happening? And so I think what we're trying to address is prevent the moment from happening. So more of like a supplement versus like a painkiller. And so I think it's tough to answer that question because every scenario is different. But I mean, there are things you can say, okay, this candidate's been stuck in this scenario in this stage for 4 or 5 days. Okay, ping recruiter, ping hiring manager. Like there's certain things that like ATSs and things I'm sure are already doing, but they can probably get better at. Those are things that we bring to light as well. So I think that it's going to be twofold. You gotta fix the symptoms to be able to so that way whenever candidates get through the funnel, like they're getting a good representation of what it's like to work at your company. Because so many times what I've seen is working at a company is great. I've worked at some great companies. I'm very, very fortunate to be able to say. But when other candidates are interviewing at these in these processes, they're getting a glimpse of what they think it's gonna be like to work at the company, and many times it doesn't match up. And so I think, like, how what you do beforehand to fix and make sure everything is optimized, I think that's gonna be the direct correlation of how that candidate experienced the process, and that's gonna be how they perceive your company, and then that's gonna impact, are they gonna accept the offer? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what it.
No, it does, but it also kind of opens up the conversation a little bit because we have AI then still wanting to take front row seat in the process, right? So we've got AI who is picking our low hanging fruit, sending us these great candidates. But there's two problems with that. That's the low hanging fruit. What about the candidates for really hard to find positions? The AI just can't tackle. That's where we are still going to need that recruitment expertise. And like you mentioned a while ago, we're going to still need some good sourcers out there who can really dive in to finding the right candidates and work with the hiring teams to develop a strategy the AI isn't a part of yet, and I don't know if it will be, to find those candidates, right? But let's say that you get them. Like right now, you've got these 10 candidates. They're great candidates. They've got the quality, they've got the experience, but we still have a broken interviewing process. And you made a great point. It's not a good representation of how wonderful this company is to work for once you get through that painful interview process. Where is AI going to help us in and at that phase of the process?
I'm comfortable saying I don't know the answer to that, but I also think the first thing that comes to mind is maybe there's a law of diminishing returns there. Maybe the more that AI is involved, especially for these hard to find roles, the less chance you have of landing that candidate because these candidates have choices. Like the really hard ones, like they probably don't even open their LinkedIn because their messages are constantly at 100 plus because they have tons of people reaching out to them. So maybe there's a law of diminishing returns. The more AI that you involve with candidate engagement, especially for those really, really talented niche roles that require very unique skills. So I don't know if there is an answer that AI will solve for those. Maybe it's more people involvement. Maybe it's more touch points of the people at that company and showing, hey, I'm a real person. I'm the one who's talking to you. And that's how much we want you to work at this company versus something automation thing that's running in the background that's sifting through people. So I think maybe the answer is less AI in those scenarios and more people.
Ah, okay, that's music to everyone's ears.
I mean, maybe we'll see. I mean, fast forward 1 year, AI might be really good at that too. Who knows? But where we're at currently, that's what I think.
Okay, so on my wish list for AI is some sort of an interrupter between talent acquisition and the hiring teams to let the hiring teams know there is a problem right now with the hiring process. We almost like a babysitter for the hiring process that keeps the person out of it. It almost keeps the people and the human part of recruiting for things that we really need the human interaction for. And I'll get to that in a second. But let's say you've got me, and we all, I mean, every recruiter I know has run into this where you've just got this, you're beating your head against the wall trying to get feedback on these candidates they've interviewed. I mean, this hiring manager's out of town. This one just left for travel. This one's in another country. This one just doesn't get back to you because he's always booked. So getting that feedback, getting that debrief meeting scheduled, it's just you're beating your head against the wall. How is AI? Who has come up yet with an AI solution to be the interrupter to be able to jump in there and push that hiring manager without human involvement to getting back in the game, right? Is there gonna be something like that?
Well, if you've seen the recent influx of talent technology, you've seen there's a lot of people trying to solve for this. And it's honestly like whenever you break down like how to do it, it's actually from a technology perspective, it's pretty simple. As long as you set up the right parameters to begin with. So you open a job, you set clear criteria, you create an interview process, you create clear criteria of what each interview's goal is, what signals you're trying to get out of that, and then you have like we all have AI note takers. If you align those notes to that framework, you can allow AI to make calls, or like, at least like create like a high level score, right? And document feedback. I remember like early on in my career, so much of what took so long was people documenting feedback and then looking at that feedback and evaluating that feedback. Everything I just mentioned, you get off the call within 5 seconds, you have a summary of what the call was like. If you've done the legwork beforehand to align that to a framework of how you're evaluating a candidate, you can just really quickly right after that say, "Yep, that summary looks good," or "I think a little differently." And but the most of the legwork is already done. And there's some technologies out there doing that currently, but like it's a very simple AI wrapper that connects to like a Gemini and OpenAI that just takes voice and aligns it to a framework of how you're trying to evaluate someone and then creates an output. So like that's there. We're not too far away from that being very, very accurate. I think I'm sure like ATSs can do that. There's third party products as well that could do that, that integrate into your ATS. I don't know what the winner is going to be of that, but like that technology is there. And there's when I did the accelerator program through Antler VC in my cohort just in Austin, there were sorry, not just not in my cohort in total, just for that, well, the fall cohort, there was like 4 or 5 companies trying to help with that, like transcribe interviews, understand the feedback and so forth. And that was just in that one VC's accelerator program. There's so many accelerator programs out there, and none of them were talent operators. So I think that's interesting. But there's so many people solving for this. I'm not concerned about that problem long term. People are afraid of what AI will do to their job, or to jobs in general. I think there's going to be consolidation of roles, like how we talked about sourcer recruiter, or maybe recruiter becomes bucketed into people ops because then it's more just candidate management. We already have a pool. We have tools to do that. Now it's just getting them through the process. You need to know the business more. You need to understand what's going on in the business to be able to communicate that more effectively to the candidate, but then also to have the business's best interests in mind. And so I think you're going to see and we talked about this as well, like a rise in more of like an entrepreneurial recruiter who maybe has like a founder mindset, or just more of a business focused mindset versus just a pure people, like external people focused mindset. Because I feel like for so long that has been recruiting. It's all about which it is about the candidate, but like the pendulum has shifted to where like businesses, like their interests are coming first right now. That's just where we're at right now in the economy. And so I think that's going to continue, but I think it's going to put more of a focus like what we've talked about on where how you can lean into to the people element more so. And so there's a lot of nuance to this, and tomorrow it'll likely be different, or in a couple months. But going to what your point on like the relocation and having more of a hand in that, like I certainly do think there needs to be more of that. But who takes that on? Is it a recruiter? I don't know. Is it people ops? I don't know. Is it more an onboarding team? I don't know, but there certainly it certainly needs to exist.
Oh, yeah, definitely, and I think that it's gonna create new roles for us, and I just want people to understand that. We are gonna have new roles in this business, and but and I've made this comment before, or do we go back to the future here? I mean, are we actually gonna go back to some of the roles that we held in the past that worked? Are we gonna be able to bring some of that human-centric recruitment servicing back into the game? Because, I mean, and take some of the move some of this transactional stuff over to AI and let us then be, like you said, the entrepreneurial recruiter or the talent acquisition consultant or the talent advisor. I mean, there's gonna be so many different roles, right? And I love the way that you're combining 2 people ops. Let's talk about that for a second. How is Benchmark then going to can Benchmark then identify some of that? I mean, will that be part of the data that you guys are developing then for companies?
Yeah. So to be clear, right now we're focused on like hiring funnel data. We are built to the next step, be able to connect to HRIS and then continue that journey all the way from outreach to fire, retire, leave the company, whatever, however you want to call it. I do want to make a comment on the entrepreneur recruiter before we move on, just really quickly. I do think that also is going to introduce a new archetype of individuals that go into the recruiting space because the nature of the role is different. And so I think you're going to have a different kind of competition for talent and a different type of talent that's attracted to the role. And I think that that goes for the entire workforce. Like you're going to start to see certain parts of some jobs go away, and then then that type of job absorbs different function, like different functions or different functionality, whatever the case is. But I think there's gonna be a huge shift in workforce planning, and it's gonna be very, very interesting over like in the next year or 2 years to zoom out and see, okay, like what are the things that have been automated? Where are we able to allow our people to be more focused on human focused activities? And then how that's going to change like workforce planning and like what jobs look like and job architecture and so forth. So I think that's a very fascinating thing to watch over the next couple of years. It's people ops leads versus recruiting leads, and those people ops leads are taking on recruiting. They're because once a candidate joins the company, historically you hand it off to more HR or whatever the case is, but now you're starting to see from outreach to hire to onboard to performance reviews, and I think that's just natural. It's a natural progression for people who are focused in a people oriented role to be there through that journey, because I mean, it also think about candidate experience, what about employee experience? And whenever there was the delineation of sourcing and recruiting, whenever there's a handoff from a sourcer to a recruiter, there was always, I mean, not always, but a lot of times there was a drop in candidate experience. Well, is that gonna be is that the same once you pass from, like, recruiting to HR? Because that's a totally different function that has totally different, like, operating rhythms, totally different maybe personalities that they hire because hiring panels are different. So, it'll be interesting to see as that evolves, like, will that create a better employee experience as well, as these people are just more like, I am holistically interested in every single person who is thinking about entering this company up until they leave the company. And so I think it's just going to become a consolidation of roles. And maybe the sourcing element becomes just more candidate management. Maybe the recruiting element is more like negotiating of offers or like, or whatever the case is. But there still needs to be that human element because it's such an important decision to be in your career. But I think there's going to be a consolidation. It'll likely, in my opinion, be just a people ops generalist, or I don't like that title, but it'll be akin to that basically.
And you made a really important comment a few minutes ago with respect to you're gonna need to know the business and get to know the business. There's a woman named Jody who had brought that up during another, podcast that we did. It was last year, and she had mentioned that every recruiter or talent acquisition practitioner, let's just say that joins a company needs to know everything about that company and needs to really dive in. And that's going to be something that's going to be, I think, brought back. It's something we needed to do a long time ago
Exciting.
because we didn't have the internet to look up. So you learned about the company from the company, right? One other topic here that's on our list, talent ambassadors. So let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I think in going like thinking about the like making sure the human touch is in recruiting, I think how we can rethink what the recruiter role looks like is talent ambassadors, or maybe even better yet, culture ambassadors.
Ooh, I like that.
Because and that's maybe just like a bullet point in the minimum requirements of the role that they're doing. But it's always been the case, but I think even more so important now because you got to think from the lens of a candidate that you're getting your resume is getting screened by AI. Sometimes you're having even AI interviews and so forth. And so the touch points you have that are human are so critical. Every second counts from a candidate's perspective as they're looking into the company. And so going back to what we were talking about, like recruiters being very, very focused on understanding the business very well, understanding the culture very well, and being able to communicate that in a way and even show that in how they're operating the day to day operations with these candidates. I think being a culture ambassador for recruiters is now more important than ever because candidates are having so many touch points with non human things. And so it's ever more important, especially like you got to think of for what are the big decisions we make in life? Who we marry, where we move, what job we take. There might be a couple other ones, but like those are three of the things that like largely influence like the outcome of not the outcome of your life, but just what you experience in life. And like to what degree you're able to experience life. And so you don't marry an AI. You don't buy a house. I mean, I guess you could do Zillow, but you still got to go look at it. You got to validate, is this something I want? And it's the exact it's the same thing with, I guess, online dating. You got to validate in person what you want. But then, like, with the actual candidates as well, like, they need to validate what it's like to work at this company. Yeah, they can have some touch points in AI to, like, filter in, like, I like this type of person, or I like this type of house, like, I like this type of job. Once I interact with that, there's a couple touch points. But whenever they really, really, really get to be bought in is whenever they get a taste of the culture of the company. And so I think more than ever, there's the importance of a recruiter being a culture ambassador is critical.
One more role to add in. I
Yeah.
love that. A culture
Totally.
ambassador. Well, and I think too, with respect to bringing people in who have to move from one
Yeah.
location to another, right? Your culture ambassador, your talent ambassador could be that conduit then for helping that person to feel comfortable with the company, the location, the culture of the company once they have a chance to meet people, meet the team, meet other people who are working.
And I think that's gonna be something that should happen more and more because,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
companies are able to operate more lean. So, like, who are your teammates? You know?
Yeah.
Do you need to have a lot of teammates? And as companies are building, like, you're seeing startups now, like, they don't need as many people. They can have, like, 6, 7, 8 people at a Series A raise because they're able to be more efficient. So, like, each person is a team. So maybe that's
Yeah.
gonna be more and more of a trend to where you're gonna see, like, I'm gonna like, and also that's also attractive. I'm gonna be owning an entire function, or, I'm one of 2 or something like that. So I think you're gonna see more and more of that. But I totally agree that's a great value add.
But workforce planning, and you brought this up, is so vital because workforce planning, your role with those executives, your role with the hiring teams and HR, we're gonna become a unified community here pretty soon. Our roles will start blending together. I think HR and talent acquisition will meld together more than it is now. It's kind of kind of been on opposite sides of the fence. I shouldn't say opposite, but there's been a fence dividing us, okay, in our
Totally.
roles and what we do. I
Especially the
think that
larger
that
you
fence
get
is
in
gonna
an
come down.
organization. If you're in the industry, there needs to be a natural level of curiosity that you have in this space. And it's not just AI. Like it's certainly the hot topic. Obviously, we talked a ton about it and everybody is. But, like, you have to be so curious in this space. You almost gotta think of it like a core curriculum. You've had math, science, social stu everything. You've had all these as a child, but, like, there's another core one that has come to town, and if you're behind, you're gonna get left behind. Oh, and I think everything you just said is gonna be a core component of what is gonna be, like, table stakes for somebody in this space. So if that's not something that you wanna do, get out. If you wanna stay in this industry, get curious, because even like what I mentioned before, there's gonna be a new archetype of individuals that comes into this role, because I think also inherently by everything we're talking about, talent acquisition is gonna just inherently have a more seat at the table than they have historically. For so long, I always heard my team saying, "Oh my gosh, like, I don't have a seat at the table." It's like, for one, get a chair and pull it up, bring something to the table, like,
I
serious.
love that. You don't
But,
have a
like,
seat at the table,
now,
go
like,
get a
it's
chair.
even more important. Like, we are operators, like, even more so now. And if you're gonna stick around, if you're gonna be in this industry and you're gonna be good, you have to be an operator. And so I think naturally we are gonna have more of a seat at the table. But yeah, that's always been a funny conversation over time. I know leaders who, regardless of role they hire for, they evaluate curiosity as a core component of every single interview. You may have a focus. You may, like, business
Ooh.
development is your focus. Are they curious? Because they may be good right now, but if something evolves, if they're not curious, they're not going to evolve either, because they're not looking into what's going on. What are the trends? So I mean, curiosity is one of that's what I want my children to have. Like, I think that's like one of the core components of what my children
It's
have, is
what we're
be
born
curious.
with.
I mean, yeah, they are born with that. We probably beat it out of them over time, you know.
We
But, like,
become
that's just,
conditioned. We
yeah.
become conditioned. We lose our I don't know though if we lose our curiosity or we just get caught up with, you mentioned a while ago, our day-to-day routines, and we start having these same thoughts that revolve in our heads, but I think that we are naturally curious as humans. Um, and so it's bringing back, and I think it's kind of exciting to have this conversation right now about curiosity. How are we going to hire on curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the run-of-the-mill questions about, like, "Tell me how you've done something differently than your peers." There's always that. But I think, and those are tried and true methods, like standard questions that you can ask about, "Tell me about a time where you, did something that was unique, that achieved outsized results because you did it differently than the status quo. Like, okay, that's a question that can open that door potentially. I think whenever you're looking at, I think, but in going back to AI, I think what separates people that are using AI is two elements: their experience, and that's what causes them to query AI to then solve based on very edge cases that and they're able to input their experience, then that can elevate the output of AI. But then I also think there is curiosity as well. And so I think you can evaluate that by doing let's be real. Candidates are using AI in interviews right now. Screen share. Show me what you're doing. Like show me how you're doing. Like show me like let's walk through a problem and show me how you would solve this using AI. And then you create and then like you get five different interviews, you create and then like over time continue to collect them. You can then pattern match and see like was that unique? Was it different? But I think like in the age of AI, like a human's creativity is what really can separate one individual from the next because how you think to use it is going to then create totally different output from that AI and whatever the case is. And so I think you can go about it that way, but then I think it's also really important to like talk to people about like what they do outside of work. If all you do is work, you might be curious in your space, but I think it's so important to exercise the mind in different ways. And how are you doing that outside of work, whether it's via family, via like sports, music, like whatever your hobbies are. I think you can get some good signals on how curious somebody is, or even just ask them a question like, tell me one thing you really geek out on that no one else knows and that you can really bore someone with a topic that only you care about and that your wife tells you to shut up about it all the time. Like we all have those.
And I love that as a question. I think that should be tell me what you really geek out on. That's a good one. That's good. I
What do you
like
geek
that.
out on?
What do I geek out on? Actually, okay, so I speak Spanish
Okay.
and I was kind of late to the table though, or late to the party, but I did pull up a chair with respect to learning how to read and write Spanish, right? And so what happened was I went back to school
That's
later and
cool.
got a degree. Yeah, I went back to
That's a great
university.
signal right there.
Yeah. And I learned well, it was my major. The Spanish became my major. And so I started geeking out on all the different dialects and whatnot. And I have friends now. In fact, I just spoke with my friend Soledad this morning. She lives in a little town called Alicante, Spain. And I talked to her a lot. We've become really good friends. We've met in person. I've actually flown to Spain to meet her. But I have another friend in Argentina. I have another one in Valencia, Spain. So what I started doing is I started like learning a lot more about their culture and about the culture of these different countries. I went to Argentina and Mexico City and whatnot. So I guess I geek out on my Spanish stuff and on this on the Latina culture. So that's my geek out.
Love it. We got married in Mexico. I love the Spanish culture. It's
So what you geek out on?
probably tennis. I could I that was that's what got me to college. I probably wouldn't have gone to college had I not played tennis, just transparently. And I geek out on gears. I taught myself. I mean, I had a couple coaches, but like I geek out on. I'm a gearhead. I just had 3 rackets strung last night. I still play in leagues. I geek out on all like the gear, the players, the strategy, and just I don't know. I could talk for hours about it.
Oh, how fun. But see, that's the kind of stuff though that we need to be asking people, I think. And I love your question. What do you geek out on? I mean, that is just such a great question. And when I was at Transform, we were sitting around a breakfast table one morning, and somebody brought up a question that is like a new question to ask candidates. And the question is, what is the biggest risk that you've ever taken
Mm,
professionally? I loved that
I love that too.
because it kind of, I think, is a sideline to curiosity. I think that we take risks if we're curious people, right? And so asking a question like that, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken professionally? Or you can even ask personally, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken, period, right?
Hmm.
Do you hear what somebody says? But that I think also too demonstrates their level of curiosity based on risks they've taken, right?
It's funny. Two
Curiosity.
HR people talking about risk taking. It's very not normal. It's
It's
not like
not.
HR to take risks, but I mean it's also a very sensitive area to take risks. But I agree wholeheartedly. I remember distinctly in college there was one of my professors said, "Who in here is willing to take a risk?" I was the only person who raised my hand, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, am I wrong?" And, you start to quiver. You see, you're a college student, and I'll never forget that because it was something that I like to look back on it. some of the either you learn a lot about yourself in the process when you do it, or you come out and you're like, wow, I'm so glad I did that because it helps me advance. Either way you're advancing, it may just be in different ways, but I think it's important to take risks.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken that you're
Building
happy
benchmark
that you did that you're happy that you took?
building benchmarking. I was making good money, and now I've bootstrapped it up until this point. Totally self funded, and I've got a family that I have to provide for as well. And my wife works and she does well, but it's one of those things I have basically taken a bet on myself with the blessing of my wife, and I wouldn't be here without her. And so I think building since June of this year, and don't get me wrong, I was doing some consulting and placing candidates. That has subsided because of taking on more and more work with Benchmark it. But this is my passion project, and this is the risk of my life so far, and I think it'll pay off. And I think at the core, it'll only pay off because like we are grounding ourselves in like making sure that what we're building is something that has the potential to uplift the entire industry, and whether it's company by company at a time, by going in and analyzing what's going on and how they can improve. But then over time, like once we're able to see like what works across so many different companies, I think it can kind of become like almost like democratized best practices of this is a place you go to be able to tap into. It's all anonymized. You can't see what any one company is doing, but we can say like we've seen 10 companies in this same scenario. We can tell you exactly what turned their success around because we see their historical performance. We see what they well, like where they're at now and what they did in between. And then we're able to even take external data to enrich that. So like I think as long as we anchor ourselves in continuing to build something that it can lift up the entire industry, I think if we'll be fine. I don't know. I think we're starting there. We're going to go to HR. We see plans to go elsewhere as well. But sorry, I'm getting all fired up about benchmarking. But that's the biggest risk I take there.
So, so far, based on the clients that you're working with, what do you see? And this is something that's going to be huge for you to provide to the community. I mean, at conferences, especially um, webinars, whatever the case may be. What do you see so far, though, as the top maybe two or three issues that people are running into, regardless of which company you're supporting or you're working with?
Yeah, one is not specific to what we learned from benchmarking. I think it's what is it? I think the recent article that came out was it's a 2.7x more applicants per job when compared to 3 years ago. So every company is just dealing with so many applicants. The rise in AI for screening candidates is turning to the rise in AI of candidates making resumes tailored to job descriptions. So it's a cat and mouse game right now. So I think that's one, and that's undeniable. I think challenges, I think it probably make more sense to share like where people are seeing more use for the product and where they're leaning in more, and that's really like using like leveraging the data and insights to influence and making it objective because it's not like it's say, hey, I'm Kevin Serwatka. I did this data analysis to support my thoughts and opinions, and I'm going to show you this because this is what I want to happen. So I'm going to manipulate the data in a certain way to then show you this is what we need to do. Like that doesn't benchmark it. It's purely objective. And so what we're seeing that's where like that is becoming like almost like where people go to start the conversation. And then from there it flourishes. So it's like recruiters are using that because maybe they're not as data literate, so they can leverage our platform to then be able to make sense of the data, whether it's how we've prepackaged it, whether it's by using the chatbot to ask like, hey, like I'm about to go meet this hiring manager for this specific job. Tell me like what's going on and like how I can or just how can I package this in a way that's clear and objective? Or if you're a hiring manager that wants to pop in and check it yourself without having to report or without having to wait for your recruiter to report. So I think that's an element that we're seeing a lot of use on. Our automated updates feature is really great as well to automate that process as well. And then I think the aggregation of the insights and suggestions that we're able to provide, because like I mentioned, like maybe there's probably the engineering team that probably goes the deepest on data in recruiting, at least in the environments that I've been at rather. And then you have other functions that are maybe less mature recruiting organizations because the company started as an engineering function. And so these pockets may or may not be doing the data analysis. So like I think by being able to then provide that objectively across the entire organization and then pattern match where there's things that like can really like positively impact the company, that's where we're seeing a lot of positive responses as well because they're like, wow, we didn't realize this was such a consistent issue. And if we fix this one thing, it's going to move the needle across every department. And then that one thing can improve so much of our performance of our recruiting function. So that's really a different way of answering.
No, that's huge. No, well, it's almost like finding out your mistakes or failures before you make them.
That's what we're hoping.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna save people, yeah, from having to learn the hard way.
But
What
that's also hard
wh
to sell. Just transparently. Like it's hard to sell like, hey, I'm gonna prevent something bad from happening. Like, hey, like, okay, cool. Like, I'll wait until it happens. So, like, that's something we're working on and see like what can we add, and we're taking constant feedback from our users on how we can then not just be more of a supplement, but more of a necessity. I think we are a necessity for companies that are really focused on optimizing and really want to be the best in the war of talent. But people who may not know they have problems, like that's where there like is a bit more learning curve of how how our platform can be a use.
I think that people are fear driven, just naturally fear driven to some degree. And I think that once you have enough data on the areas where people have caught things ahead of time and been able to course correct using your tool to save them from falling into A, B, and C categories that could be potentially harmful to the company or, I mean, take it down a bad rabbit hole or whatever. Being able to list those things out as, "Okay, we're gonna prevent this from happening." I mean, you're seeing it now with cybersecurity companies, but there's companies out there who are saying, "Hey, we can prevent this from happening to you," because we're all aware of it. So what as benchmark is, I mean, advancing and getting out there more, you guys are gonna be able to identify those issues, those challenges that could either make or break a company and be able to bring it to the forefront and use that for your marketing and your branding to other companies so that they're, "Oh, yeah, we don't want that to happen."
And I see us ultimately being a place where we can object. Well, especially once we get more and more users. The more users we get, the more powerful the platform will become. But also, we'll be able to objectively say like who the best are at hiring and who have the best processes, and maybe that's something that we can do to highlight them as well. So I see that as maybe a down the road a feature. But to your point about like the hackers, I do want to make a plug for a company that I really like that I used to support. They're called Cloaked. It's cloaked.id. They do a really good job of helping people like retroactively like reduce their footprint online to reduce the thing for hackers. It's a really, really cool concept.
Well, to check it out. Yeah, because I mean, and I think that as AI, of course, is with us, the longer it's with us, the more we're going to see some inconsistencies there, some issues that come up that we need to address and whatnot. And if data analytics companies and data performance companies like Benchmark can help us to get ahead of the curve on some of that, it's just going to save us a lot of time. It's also going to save us from having to pay a lot of money then to correct the problems that come up, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's also an inherent risk with using those kind of services. And that's something that we've tried to solve around is like we don't ingest candidate names or emails or phone numbers or anything like that. We can associate a candidate ID with an application ID with an interview ID to follow them through the funnel and be able to pattern match that way without knowing their names. But anytime you're dealing with personal protected information and then leveraging a data analysis function or a third party company or whatever the case is, even LLMs for that matter, I think that's something to also just be very, very mindful of those who are exploring AI tools is like, what data are you giving away? And is that aligned with GDPR? Is that aligned with other various laws that are in place that protect whenever a candidate submits their information to you, they are giving you their trust. And so are you giving the same amount of trust and care to the third party services that you're using? So I think that's something also that I know the security privacy teams are very hyper aware of that. We're dealing with that as we're going through privacy security reviews with teams as well. But that's just something that I think is very important that every company needs to be grounded in trust in how they operate whenever it comes to personal protected information.
Wow, great conversation. Great conversation. I think we covered a lot of our
We did.
topics.
I didn't think we were going to get through all of that. Talk on most.
I know. I think we did. So, Kevin, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so we have our website. You can contact me there. My email is kevin@benchmarkit.ai. I'm on LinkedIn, recruiter by trade, didn't have much of a choice there. So yeah, feel free to reach out in any way. I mean, a lot of what we've done up until this point is by sharing, like giving demos, getting feedback. I've given over 100 demos to like people in talent to ultimately shape the product and then prepare it for launch. So that doesn't mean we're stopping that. So if anybody's curious, wants to check it out, we're also for a short period of time, we're also offering a 14-day free trial because I know there's so many AI tools out there right now. A lot of people want to test it out. So anybody who's interested in something like what we're building, we're happy to provide that. And then that way you can evaluate like in your own environment, is this even creating possible insights because AI spits out a lot of information. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We think we've done a good job training it, but I think the proof is in the pudding. And so we're offering that trial. So if anybody's interested, I'm happy to connect, get you set up, and that way you can evaluate it for yourself and even help you like on board to where we can make it as valuable for you as well. So Kevin at benchmarkit.ai and LinkedIn is good too.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. I think that we covered a lot of interesting territory.
Yes. And it's always good to see you. I've enjoyed the conversations we've had, and this is no different.
I know, no, it's fun. It's fun. I think that we bring out each other's curiosity,
Yes. Yes, totally.
which is always good to do. I know. I always enjoy my conversations with engaging people. So thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it. It's great to have you.
Likewise. And I appreciate you having me. So feel free to reach out if you ever need anything. Happy to be a resource. But
Oh,
really,
you
thank you so
bet. Yeah, no, we'll stay in contact definitely.
cool.